thanks for having me. It's really nice to see a few familiar faces. I used to work at Lewisham, so it's nice to see so many people from Lewisham Council here today. So I'm currently a senior advisor in the leadership team at the LGA. So my team deliver a range of councillor and officer national leadership programmes. So what I wanted to do today was to kind of present the LGA's perspective on some of the challenges facing local government leaders in 2026, and also to kind of discuss some of the skills and solutions that we think are needed to meet those challenges. So what I'm going to be talking about is going to be based on what we're hearing from the senior officers who attend our national leadership programmes, including those that we deliver with our partners such as Solace. And I'm going to cover three key challenges in particular that we believe leaders are facing, and they relate to finance, transformation and resilience. And I'm going to start with finance. So obviously the local government sector has been grappling with kind of sustained financial pressures and financial uncertainty since 2010. And, absolutely these pressures will still be here next year. So kind of in this context, I think a key challenge is going to be ensuring that meeting financial challenges is a priority for all the organisation's leaders. So the overall approach and mindset of the organisation when dealing with financial uncertainty, so the kind of organisational culture around finance is really important, because leaders throughout the organisation need to be finding solutions for mitigating and managing financial risk. So those relationships that exist between finance leaders and other leaders are particularly crucial. So the relationship between the finance function and the rest of the organisation is key, because I think it needs to, foster a really open environment so that risks are addressed early and everyone has absolute clarity on their roles, expectations and lines of accountability. One other thing we're kind of noticing is that, some of the leaders that come on our programmes comment on how they're increasingly being required to be a bit financially ambidextrous. So kind of more and more they're looking across a number of different services and kind of weaving together resources from a variety of different places. And, that can be quite challenging. And then finally, and kind of linked to the next challenge of transformation, I think is having a finance function and a kind of wider organisation that's really enabled by technology. So, staff need to be trained so they know how to use it effectively, but the technology itself needs to be able to provide really easy access to kind of comprehensive information which supports sound financial management. So moving on to transformation, kind of from the LGA's perspective, an absolute major challenge nationally is local government reorganisation. And, I appreciate this isn't applicable to all local authorities, but I think the kind of underlying requirement to transform and to kind of embrace digitalisation is something that all local authorities need to consider going forwards. And to kind of meet this challenge, I think it's really important that, we're encouraging leaders to be visionary, to kind of think strategically and to encourage innovation. So, we want leaders that make the most of AI, that kind of use data effectively, and, use data in particular to kind of prioritise transformation activity and drive and enable change. However, I think that whilst fostering innovation is, really important, I think when leaders are doing this, they need to make sure they're doing it safely. So that's with kind of governance and control. They need to be really adept at managing risk and resources. And I think AI in particular needs to be kind of deployed safely. They also need to kind of innovate in a compelling manner. So, it's really important when thinking about transformation that you kind of take people with you. So maybe kind of have change champions embedded in teams. You need to be thinking about how you're going to coach people through change, manage stakeholders really well, and just, generally create a kind of really compelling narrative for change and communicate that vision effectively. And then finally, I think it's really important to kind of innovate in a way that ensures benefits realisation, because I think that's often kind of forgotten sometimes. So, that's about measuring transformation outcomes and tracking those financial savings to kind of ensure that the innovation that you've been working on has had the intended effect. And also to kind of communicate the benefits throughout the organisation, because you want that progress to be sustained and built on. And I think it's worth noting that kind of both the finance and transformation challenges that we believe leaders are facing, they require leaders to take a long-term strategic view, but they require them to do this despite kind of immense daily pressures. And they've also got to influence others and bring them along on the journey. So just the kind of process itself is very challenging, I think. So one other challenge that I wanted to speak about that kind of at the LGA we've noticed and that we think might become even more prevalent in 2026 is resilience, the both kind of personal resilience and community resilience. So for example, I think local government leaders are facing some really complex challenges on the ground, particularly around community cohesion at the moment. So we've had the migrant hotel protests, we've had flag issues that kind of many local authorities have been grappling with, and just the kind of general context that communities are in distress. So, we've got a cost of living crisis after a pandemic. So I think looking forward to 2026, I think leaders need to be, able to really understand what's happening in their neighbourhoods and kind of come up with innovative responses that make their communities more resilient. But while they're doing this, they need to kind of protect their own resilience and well-being at the same time. I think collaboration is key to this. So working with other leaders such as the police and health services, etc., to find solutions. Because the complexity of place can be a challenge, but I think it can also be an opportunity. And what we found from kind of speaking to some leaders on our leadership programs is that often kind of what leaders really need is actually just a space to stand still, to kind of speak to colleagues and other leaders, to form a clear understanding about the situation and consider a joined up response. So fostering these kind of opportunities to collaborate, to share challenges and experiences and perspectives and to work on solutions together is really important. And then kind of finally, linked to this, so to kind of issues around community cohesion, I think is the challenge of protecting the workforce. So at the LGA, we've heard reports of some incredibly worrying behaviour from residents and more junior officers in particular facing heightened abuse. And, there's been instances of contractors refusing council contracts because of worker safety. So senior leaders really need to consider how to protect staff and also how to kind of protect themselves, right? Because abuse and intimidation against senior officers and particularly senior women, sadly, it's kind of an increasingly concerning issue. So I think we just really need to think, are the right policies in place and are they being implemented consistently and effectively? And I should probably just mention misinformation as well, because what we're finding is that, council communication teams are increasingly having to deal with misinformation about their council. And that can be, a real challenge trying to kind of combat that narrative. So I think that's something that you really need to consider. I just wanted to include this slide on research, and the slides will be kind of circulated after this event, because I think that when thinking about how to upskill leaders to kind of meet future challenges, it's really worth kind of thinking about some of the research that's out there. So the first link on this slide is to some research from InlaGov on being a 21st century public servant. So it essentially covers the kind of key skills that they believe all local government officers need. So yeah, it's really worth a read. I've also included a link to what the World Economic Forum thinks everyone will need by 2030 in terms of skills. And unsurprisingly, I think they focus quite heavily on technology. So for that reason, I've also included a kind of third link, because I do think it's important to consider the importance of the human factor. So technology absolutely is really important, but this recent Deloitte survey just highlights that we mustn't forget human skills as well. I did want to touch briefly on some of the things we can do to meet these challenges. And, obviously I'm from the LGA, so I'm going to reference our offer, but I genuinely believe that we've got some great support and improvement resources. So at the LGA, we kind of operate a sector support model. So we kind of use leaders from within the sector to help other leaders through support offers such as we do corporate peer challenges, we do a range of leadership support. That's kind of what I'm involved in. So I just wanted to kind of provide a link to some of our officer leadership programs because we've got some really good ones for like a range of different officers, for diverse talent, so kind of middle leaders, for aspiring chief executives. And we've also got a really good range for statutory officers. So that's kind of monitoring officers, chief financial officers, and chief executives. So we've got individual programs for each of those statutory roles, and also kind of opportunities for the three of them to come together. So yeah, if you follow the first link on this slide, that's kind of more information on that. But I've also included some links for further information on specific support around those three key challenges of finance, transformation, and cohesion. But I think my time is probably coming to a close, but I'd just like to end with some final tips. So some specific kind of learning and development tips from the LGA's experience. So one of the things that we're currently finding on our programs, and our programs are often kind of quite lengthy, they're structured, they're kind of in-person courses. And one of the things we're finding is that they're just not right for everything. So we're kind of embracing more and more alternative ways of providing leadership training. So at the moment, we're doing a lot of bite-sized work. So that's either very kind of short e-learning modules and video explainers, because we just think this is a great way of explaining complex concepts around things like finance and transformation, you know, particularly when you're thinking about broader staff cohorts. We're also doing quite a lot at the moment in terms of creating communities of practice, working out loud circles, and just, you know, ensuring that action learning and immersive experiences are part of our programs, because we just think they're a great way to learn. So tackling real challenges collaboratively with a kind of broad range of colleagues. And in particular, problem-based learning that is collaborative but is also life-wide. So kind of training that encourages learners to bring in skills from outside work seems particularly suited to meeting challenges around finance transformation and resilience. And then one small thing I do at the LGA that actually has quite a big impact for me at least, is to diarise thinking time. So that is setting aside time each week for strategic thinking to tackle a particular issue. So while I think it's quite common nowadays to kind of put focus time in your diary so you can, you know, tackle tasks, get through your emails, etc., I think ring fencing time just to kind of think is less common, but it can be really powerful when you're kind of faced with these, you know, massive challenges. So I think my time is probably up now, but I'd just like to end on a really positive note because, you know, at the LGA, we really believe that the local government sector is an amazing sector to work in, and you know, leaders make a real and tangible difference to their communities every day. So we absolutely believe that we're in a great place to be able to meet all of these future challenges. Thank you.